All right, so we have a cozy group this morning. The so this series of why I keep fighting the same fight all my life really developed out of today's service. This was the kind of the origin idea of going, if we have this sense of fighting the same thing, well, it's got to be these guys, these undefeated nations that never get fully dealt with. If you recall the story, the children of Israel are coming out of the desert. They come into the land, and they get tasked with wiping out everybody who's already there. But they don't do it. They fail to do it. And it seems like as you follow the story along, it's these guys who were already there and not dealt with that come back and just haunt them for the next, few hundred years. And they keep causing them trouble because they've never been dealt with at the outset. And so I dug into this story saying, okay, well, what's going on here? What do these different nations represent? What's happening here? Why is it that they don't get dealt with? And you find out a little bit of that. Well, Moses, he warns them this is going to happen. There's some future telling that, this doesn't happen quickly. Things take time. And I think it's part of it. So what we'll see here is that, we have to learn to deal with our imperfections as life goes on, because it is more complex than just go in, wipe it out, and done. But on the other side of it, you have Joshua and Caleb, who are, we can do this. We can knock it out. We can wipe them out. Nothing's going to stand in our way. We can get them. And so as we go through our readings, you just kind of have to see that, you have these kind of two opposing things that, yes, we can do it, and they, no, we can't. And it's kind of okay that we didn't. But now we're going to have to learn how to deal with this mess we have. So I'm going to start you off with this reading from Joshua. And this is Joshua talking to Caleb talking to Joshua. You remember that Caleb's the one of the two spies of the 12 who came back when they scouted the land and said, yes, we can do this. We can do this. So he's saying to Joshua, so what's happening now is they've gone into the land, and in general, they've got it under control. But now they're actually getting specific about dividing up it into different territories for the tribes. So Caleb's trying to claim his inheritance. Says, now give me this hill country that the Lord promised me that day. You yourself heard then that the Anakites were there, and their cities were large and fortified. But the Lord helping me, I will drive them out just as I said. Look at that. No hesitation. Lord helping me, I'll take care of it. Then Joshua blessed Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and gave him Hebron as his inheritance. So Hebron has belonged to Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, ever since, because he followed the Lord, the God of Israel, wholeheartedly. Hebron used to be called Kiriath Arba after Arba, who was the greatest man among the Anakites. Then the land had rest from war. And I'll bring your attention to that little parenthesis part of verse 15, because it's a real clue, I think, as to how this process goes. Because the Anakites, you may recall, are the sons of Anak, which is the people who existed before the flood. So these were the bads of the bads of the bads. And there were still some kicking around. And Caleb goes in there and wipes them out. So if we think about this, all right, those guys are gone, and we're going to see who's left. And I think you're starting to see a picture of what the Lord says, all right, this part has to go. The Anakim, which represent this overinflated sense of self, this manipulating others for one's gain, and all these false beliefs about how great we are, that's got to go. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. The Anakim go. And Caleb, who's full on, we'll do it, I can take care of it, does it. So to me, I see that as we cross the Jordan and we start parsing out the land, the first thing that has to happen for us is a sense of humility. A sense of humility that I'm not the greatest. That has to be your starting point. everything else kind of can come in time. Because what we're going to see here next is Joshua 15, verse 63. Judah could not dislodge the Jebusites who were living in Jerusalem. And to this day, the Jebusites live there with the people of Judah. Now, Judah has this great correspondence of loving the Lord and all that, but still, there's some Canaanites there. Joshua 16, they did not dislodge the Canaanites living in Gezer. To this day, the Canaanites live among the people of Ephraim, but are required to do forced labor. So just to be clear here, how the word talks about these different nations, everybody's a Canaanite. If you're in the land, you're all Canaanites. But then it talks like Jebusites and Hivites and all these guys, they are subcategories of Canaanites. So Judah didn't dislodge the Jebusites who are Canaanites. Ephraim didn't get rid of the Canaanites in Gezer. And then we get to Joshua 17. Within Issachar and Asher, Manasseh also had Bethshan, Ibleam, and the people of Dor, Endor, Tanakh, Megiddo, together with their surrounding settlements. Yet the Manassites were not able to occupy these towns, for the Canaanites were determined to live in that region. However, when the Israelites grew stronger, they subjected Canaanites to forced labor, but did not drive them out completely. So I hope you're starting to see this pattern here of can't get rid of all the Canaanites, but we're going to put them to forced labor. The people of Joseph said to Joshua, "Why have you given us only one allotment and not one portion for an inheritance? And we are a numerous people, and the Lord has blessed us abundantly." "If you're so numerous," Joshua answered, if the hill country of Ephraim is too small for you, go up into the forest and clear land for yourselves, there in the land of the Perizzites and the Rephaites. The people of Joseph replied, "The hill country is not enough for us, and all the Canaanites who live in the plain have chariots fitted with iron, both those in Bethshan and its settlements, and the valley of Jezreel." But Joshua said to the tribes of Joseph and to Ephraim and Manasseh, "You are numerous and very powerful. You will have not only one allotment, but the forested hill country as well. Clear it, and its farthest limits will be yours. Though the Canaanites have chariots fitted with iron, and though they are strong, you can drive them out." So Joshua, he's still a can-do guy. You can do this. You see the enemy, go wipe him out. It's not a problem. And then we get to this next bit. The Lord was with the men of Judah. He's right there. They took possession of the hill country, but they were unable to drive the people from the plains because they had chariots fitted with iron. So, they saw these chariots are going to be a problem, and sure enough, it is. As Moses had promised, Hebron was given to Caleb, who drove it from the 3 sons of Anak. The Benjaminites, however, did not drive out the Jebusites, who were living in Jerusalem. And to this day, Jebusites live there with Benjamites. But Manasseh did not drive out the people of Bethshan, or Tanakh, or Dor, or Ibleam, or Megiddo, and their surrounding settlements, for the Canaanites were determined to live in that land. You ever feel like you have Canaanites determined to live in your land? When Israel became strong, they pressed the Canaanites into forced labor, but never drove them out completely. Nor did Ephraim drive out the Canaanites living in Gezer, but the Canaanites continued to live among them. Neither did Zebulun drive out the Canaanites in Kitron or Nahal, so those Canaanites lived among them. But Zebulun did subject them to forced labor. You see that coming up again and again. Nor did Asher drive out those living in Akko or Sidon or Alab or Azkib or Helba or Aphek or Renob. The Asherites lived among the Canaanite inhabitants of the land because they did not drive them out. Neither did Naphtali drive out those living in Beth Shemesh or Beth Anash, but the Naphtalites too lived among the Canaanite inhabitants of the land. And those living in Beth Shemesh and Beth Anath became forced laborers for them. The Amorites confined the Danites to the hill country, not allowing them to come into the plain, and the Amorites were determined to hold out in Mount Heres, Aijalon, and Shalbim. But when the power of the tribes of Joseph increased, they too were pressed into forced labor. The boundary of the Amorites from the Scorpion Pass to Selah and beyond. So it looks like a pretty dramatic failure if you read that, going, oh gosh, we have this task and every one of them failed. Oh yeah, we got chariots. Oh, they're determined to live there. Oh, this is not good. And so we have to take a look at what are these guys all about. Well, chariots fitted with iron have this representation of false beliefs, but false beliefs that don't actually translate into evil actions. So it's a matter of understanding things wrong, but it's not manifesting you into doing bad things. So having those guys around, it isn't that bad. Chariots fitted with iron isn't that bad of a deal in this case. And it's the same thing with these Hivites and these Jebusites and all these different tribal groups that live there, is that while they have idolatrous tendencies, it is a tendency. And it says that they all have some goodness or truth, depending on which one it is. They all have some of that mixed in there as well. So these guys aren't out and out evil. But what they do is they tend us and move us into things that we shouldn't be doing that lead us kind of astray. So all these nations, they cause trouble for us, but they don't actually fully lead us into being evil people. When I was looking up the story and saying, well, all right, what do all these things represent? And Swedenborg goes into saying, look, he says, I don't have time to write out all the individual stuff. But what he says that in general is happening here is that this story is about how we collect evil in our life. We acquire evil from the evil things and the false beliefs that we've done. And that while we are forgiven for them by the Lord, they are still part of our network. They are still part of our life. So, you go through a phase in your life where you like pushing little old ladies down staircases. That just is part of your life experience. And these nations being defeated, that gets pushed off to the side. You have it under control. You're not doing it anymore. They're under tribute. So now these bad things you've learned something from them. They've given you something good. But they're still there. That's still part of your life history. And he's like, forgiveness of sins doesn't mean that stuff didn't happen. It did happen. And you can't get rid of it. It's always there. And there are times when the hells are going to drag that stuff up in front of your face and say, look at what you did. Look at what you did. Ugh, it's going to drive you crazy. And it's going to swell up. But when you're in control and in your power, say, no, you guys are under control by the Lord. I've got it. I'm going to put it back down. But eventually an uprising will happen, and you go through this process again. And again, what Swedenborg says is that we don't realize just how intricately networked our loves and our lives are. And that to get rid of this in an instant, it destroys your life. You still need those connections, and that's why the Lord says we put them under forced labor, because you're going to bring something good out of it, and then to remove it, well, you leave a vacuum of power. If you look at this last reading here, it's from Exodus, and the Lord warns Moses that this is going to take time. He says, I will send hornets before you, which shall drive out the Hivite, the Canaanite, and the Hittite from before you. I will not drive them out from before you in a year, lest the land become desolate and the beasts of the field become too numerous for you. Little by little I will drive them out before you, until you have increased and you inherit the land. So if you're going to take out the evil, you've got to have something good to replace it, and until you've become productive enough, you can't remove it. And if you follow this story about the conquest of the land, when does it actually really become fully taken over? Not really until Solomon's time. It's just like what we're seeing here. It takes time. I'm not going to drive it out in a year. It's going to take a long time. David's going to have to fight with Goliath. And you'll also notice that the Jebusites, who we just saw in this Joshua or Judges reading, the Jebusites who were still there with the Benjaminites, they don't get taken out until David comes along. Those of you who've been here for a long time know that David is the representation of the Lord. So who does the final fighting? The Lord himself. So you've got to get from this place where you go in, you take over the land with Caleb. Caleb and Joshua, they put that love of self, the sons of Anak, they put that under control. Say, all right, we've got that out of the way. And now you have to go through and work on the serving other people. Because Caleb and Joshua have this representation more specifically about a spiritual church. It's about the kind of church, the kind of people who like to serve others. So, all right, got the love of self under control. Now I got to learn to serve others. It's going to take some time. And eventually, the Lord's going to come along in the form of David, and he's going to wipe out Goliath, the Philistines. He's going to go through all of these different things and take them out one by one. And eventually, he's going to take over Jerusalem from the Jebusites and establish the capital, the real thing right there. And once we've got that, we can be Solomon. We can have real wisdom. We can say, all right, now we're going to do this the Lord's way. It's all going to go great. We're going to have a wonderful palace. It's all going to be fantastic. And it's going to be amazing. Little by little. So what we see here is this story is really a bringing to a real example of Exodus. It's going to take some time. And in the process, we have to learn how to deal with our imperfections. Right? Those Gibeonites, what do we do with them? Forced labor. Oh, the Jebusites, what are we going to do with them? Forced labor. We've got to somehow deal with these imperfections and make this whole system work, because it doesn't go away just like that. It just doesn't. So it's an interesting balance between being hard enough on ourselves and having enough faith in the Lord to go out and have the battles and win the battles that we're called to fight. But on the other hand, being okay, going, okay, well, doggone it, they had those chariots fitted with iron. I mean, it's, there's only so much I can do. Those Canaanites, doggone it, they're determined to live here. I guess today is not the day where I root them out. Today is not the day where we win the battle and we don't see them again. It's going to take time. So I guess that's where I want to end up with this little series, is just thinking about, why you keep fighting the same fights is because, well, you just haven't got there yet. You haven't had the David come through in life. You haven't gone through that last process of really having the Lord come through and clean out the last bits. And so while we are called to do better, sometimes you've just got to be patient with yourself as well. Amen.